If you're having issues with a broken pull cord start on whether it be your Weedeater, chainsaw, blower, whatever those things are, don't just jump to throwing this unit away or completely buying a new pull start housing, as I'm going to show you a few things to check to make this an easy repair. What's up guys? This is Brent with Western Equipment. Now, keep in mind that I am using a steel here today for my example, but these things to check can be used across any brand, no matter what type of unit you have. But the first thing that we need to check is the actual spring system inside of our pull starter here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the back off of this steel unit so we can see that spring system. Now, what we're actually checking for here is going to be on the inside of that starter, which is going to be this spring system here. Now, what we're looking for is to see if our springs have been sprung or if they've been damaged. Now, as you can see in this one here, we cannot actually see the springs, but we can test to make sure that they are still functioning. So what we would do is we would actually grab this mechanism here and start to turn it one way or the other, seeing if we start to get tension whenever we spin this unit. So whenever you're spinning this housing, like I am right here, I do have tension, as you see when I let go there. So that is telling me that the springs are still good in this unit, and also the housing that the springs are sitting in is also still good here. Now, if you were to not have any tension on that spring, that means that we could have damage in a couple of different places. For one, our actual housing right here could be damaged and this may need to be replaced. So for instance, on this unit, how we would check that is we can actually remove the center screw that we have right there in the middle. And keep in mind that each brand is going to be different, and then also within those brands, different sizes of units could be different. So this is going to be kind of one of those things that we have to check all different courses to make sure that we are good to go here. So as we can see here on this unit, on the back of this spring here, or on the back of this housing, we have a notch here that is actually going to line up. If you can see that little curled over piece of the spring right inside that unit, that notch is actually going to fit right over that spring, and that is what's making contact to give us the actual tension here on this spring unit. So as long as that's good, as long as we have tension, then everything is good there with our actual rewind starter. Now, once we've determined that our housing is good, that our spring is functioning correctly, and that there is no damage to our actual spool, now we are moving to dealing with the actual rope part of the starting system. So for instance, here on this machine, we had the rope break off. You can see right there the frayed ends, and then right here in the bottom of our spool is actually going to be the little piece of string right here where it broke off. So I'm just going to go ahead and take some needle nose and pull that out just like so. Now, once we have that string all the way out, and hopefully you still have all the pieces, the next thing that we need to do is determine the length of the piece of rope that we need. Now, a lot of times whenever we're looking, especially at these steel units, we can call a dealer and get the exact length of the piece of string that we need. But if we don't happen to have that opportunity, then what we need to do is actually pull that string out, get it out of our handle if we still have it, and out of our spool, and go ahead and get a measurement on that length. Now, you may have some knots here in the ends, which you should have a knot at your handle end and a knot at your spool end. So you'll have to add just a tick for those knots that are in there. But what we would do is go ahead and lay this out and then get a quick measurement on that to see just about how much of that we have. And then from there, that will help us determine how much of this rope that we need to get. Now, the third thing that we need to consider also, because you are going to see differences in the types of ropes whenever we're talking about these different units, is going to be the diameter of rope. So that is obviously going to be the diameter or the thickness of the rope that we have here. Now this is going to be very tough sometimes to get an accurate measurement on. A good thing to do is to take that old piece of rope with you to that hardware store, to that parts store, and try to match it up the best you can. The best way of doing this, if you can at all possible, is if you have a set of calipers that will measure in millimeters, is to go ahead and find a good spot on this rope where it seems pretty solid here. Go ahead and pull it tight and then get a measurement on this rope with those calipers to see what you're at. For instance, with steel, you are going to have such measurements as a 2.7 millimeter or a 3 millimeter. Different sizes of ropes are going to be made for different pieces of equipment. Not to say that if you don't go up just a tick bigger that it won't still work, but it is always good to go with the same size of rope that came on your unit that broke before. Now the question also comes is, well, if I used the smaller rope before and it broke, is it a good idea for me to go up to the larger rope? And the answer is, as long as your spool will handle it, as long as the amount will fit in your spool that is required for that machine, then yes, you could go ahead and use that. For instance here, whenever I go to replace this string in just a moment, I have actually jumped up from the 2.7 millimeter up to a 3 millimeter just to give a little bit more strength here and durability to this rope. Now, once you have all of those things determined, you've got your machine apart, you have your new rope, your handle, your housing's good, and also your spool is good. Now it's going to be time to reassemble. Now there could be multiple different ways of doing this depending on the type of unit that you're using, but most of these are going to be fairly similar. So like I said, I'm going to give you a demonstration of how to put this back together on this KM56. Now the first thing that we need to do is, once we get our new rope, if our ends have not been melted down and kind of pushed to a point, you want to go ahead and get a lighter out and go ahead and heat this up where we don't have those fringing off there, and make sure and get these out to a point. That is going to make it easier going into not only our spool, but also going into and out of our housing right here. So what we want to do is we want to start here at the spool end, and what we're going to do is go ahead and feed this through our notch right here, and then go ahead and start to pull this string through. Once we get that through, we're going to make a simple knot here on the other side. Just get this very close to the end here. Get that knot as tight as we can get it. May take a couple pairs of pliers. Pull this apart. Make sure that this is good and tight here. Just like so. Then we're going to go ahead and pull our rope the rest of the way through, and then get this knot seated down in here as best as we can. All right, then once we've got that seated, here on the KM56, we'll notice that we have a notch here for our rope, and what we're going to do is set that and then pull it out just like so. Then we're going to take our housing here, and we are going to set this back down in, and then also put our screw. Now remember, we need to get our open notched in here, matched up with our spring, and the end of our spring is going to be right here on this housing. So we want to make sure and take this notched in and go in to that spring, and then go ahead and start to wind this backwards and make sure, once again, that we do have that tension. So once we have that, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to leave this rope in its notch just like so. Then what we're going to do is go ahead and put in our screw to make sure and keep our spool into the housing here, just like so. Now the next part is just a little bit tricky. This is where you're going to have to be just a little bit careful here. Is what we want to do is we want to take this and get this to where the tension is coming, and we're going to spin this housing back against the tension about 6 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the trick here is making sure and holding on to the housing and not letting it spin, getting our rope pulled back and out of the housing just like so. we want to find the end of our rope here. And now what we want to do is get it fed out through the hole that our handle is going to be coming out of, just like so. Then we want to pull this out. This whole time we're keeping that tension held on our spool. Now what we can start to do is start to let that tension off of our spool and also let our housing loose, just like that. And then once we've got it to where we have just a little bit of rope sticking out here, this is when we want to go ahead and go on with our handle. Same thing here, we're going to go ahead and make that simple knot. Get this good and tight. And then we can continue to let that rope make its way back down into the housing. Now, from doing that, as you can see, we don't have any slack here. When I go to pull on that, we've got plenty of tension, or I can just let it loose. We can see that everything is put back together here. We can also see that when we look down inside that housing, we have no rope actually sticking out of the spool. Everything is nice and compact in there, and everything is tight. We do have that tension that we're looking for, and then that way we are completely repaired. Now the last thing to do is just to go ahead and get your housing put back onto your machine. You would also want to make sure and give this a test run. Make sure that it is going to fire. Make sure that everything lines up here when you're going back on with your housing. Get those bolts put back in, get everything tightened down. So once everything's put back together, now this is when we want to go ahead and give a test pull. Make sure that whenever we release that rope, that it is going to go back into the housing. Make sure and be there with no slack. Once we have that done, you know you've got your unit repaired. So guys, I hope this video helped you out. I hope you liked this video. If you did, we just ask you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also guys, if you're looking for any John Deere parts, make sure to go check us out at 247parts.com. And as always guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, make sure to check out this cool video and this one. Buy your parts right up here and subscribe right here.